Welcome to our Tuesday Tea.
I'm your host, Vanessa.
And I'm your co-host, Charisse.
Back to another episode of Tuesday Tea. I'm your host, Vanessa, and my co-host, unfortunately, is out today. This week, I only had one day that I was able to record, and my co-host has obviously work and obligations. So I am solo today, but hopefully for our next recording next week, we can get back on track and and get our normal flow going again. I'm back in classes and things right now, so it is a little harder to schedule these recordings, but we will get there. So today's episode is going to be on grief, which is a huge one for me. I lost my mother 15 years ago. So it's been quite some time, which is crazy to think about because I feel like there's days where it was just yesterday that I spoke to her, that I saw her. I remember her voice, her laugh, everything. And then there's other days where it's like, it feels like an eternity. It's definitely a journey. And I've come to realize, a lot of people have said that it gets better with time. As time passes, you start to feel better, or you start to, I wouldn't say forget, but, you just kind of, I think from obviously going through this and my experience, I don't think it ever gets any easier, to be honest. I just think that I've found healthier ways of coping and finally going through the 5 stages of grief, because there are 5 stages. Going through those stages on my own, well, not on my own, actually. I did have help from therapy a year after my mother passed away, because it was just crucial for me at that time. I had no healthy coping skills. It was, my mother was the first person that I had ever really lost in my life. So to have your first kind of like death to experience be your own mother was really, really hard, shocking, and just extremely difficult for me. Another thing too, it was unexpected. My mother did have a heart condition, which we didn't know about. We just didn't know how serious it actually was. So when she passed away, it was kind of like a bit of a shock. We had no idea. We had no idea how bad it was. She had a heart condition. We actually spent Mother's Day with her in May of 2007. My mom had cooked dinner that night for Mother's Day, and she wasn't eating. And I remember asking her, hey, Mom, why aren't you eating? And she's like, oh, she just said she didn't feel good. Anyway, that night, between midnight and 3 a.m. is when she had passed away. And we found out the next day. So we found out that Monday after Mother's Day. So yes, that was difficult. And Mother's Day, as you could imagine, are difficult, not only because it's Mother's Day, but, that is kind of like our death anniversary date for our mom. So that was tough. That was really tough. So, there's stages of grief, and I had no idea about any of that until I'd gone through it myself. First stage of grief is anger, denial. And, I definitely experienced that. And then I had jotted down some notes. Now, denial can look like avoidance, procrastination, forgetting, easily distracted, keeping busy at all times, and mindless behaviors. Now, for me, I was definitely one of those keep busy at all times. I remember I completely immersed myself in work. Working day jobs, night jobs. I was just constantly working on a go, go, go type of schedule, because I think I just didn't and couldn't face reality of what had actually happened. I remember at the time I managed a store, and I had to open the store the morning. I think it was not the morning that she passed, but the morning after. And they just needed me to really just go in, open the store, wait a half hour for the next person to get there. And then I was able to leave. And obviously at that point I hadn't slept. And I remember like a zombie walking into the store, and a woman had crossed my path, and I had to do a double take to look at her, because I could have sworn she looked just like my mother. I could have sworn it was my mother walking by. And when I like looked back for the second time, I wound up realizing that the woman looked nothing like my mother. She had blonde hair and, just nothing like my mom. But I was just, I don't know, I think I was in a state of shock, completely in a state of shock. And this denial on for quite some time with me. I faced it. It wasn't like I was acting like she was still here. I definitely, had the understanding that she was gone. But the denial and the just avoidance of everything went on for quite some time for me. And definitely, I had experienced many mindless behaviors. It was almost like a downward spiral for me from the time that she passed away. Denial can also look like not what it feels like, but what it looks like is like confusion, shutting down, which shutting down was a huge one that I did also, but it's a normal part of grief. It is something that we all either go through or have to go through. It's normal. It's normal. At that time, nothing felt normal to me. The next stage, there's another stage of grief, the second stage. They say that there's 5 stages. Obviously, there's so many emotions mixed into each stage. So you're going to experience so many different feelings. So anger is the second stage of grief. And boy, did I experience anger. And then what anger can look like when you're grieving, it can look like pessimism, sarcasm, physical fights, increased alcohol or drug abuse. So those are some things that come along with anger. I think I experienced a lot of anger because, like I had mentioned with my mother, we didn't know how serious her heart condition was. We knew that she had a heart condition. We knew that she was taking medication for it. And we did know that she needed surgery. My mother was so afraid of everything. It's so funny when it came to stuff like that, like medically. When it comes to like rides and being adventurous and spontaneous, she was way braver than I ever was. Like I was never as brave as her in that sense. But when it came to anything else, like any kind of like surgeries or stuff like that, she was very scared, very, very scared of that. And so we knew that she needed surgery. We didn't know that it was like a life or death situation. And I had experienced this anger because I was the oldest. I wasn't living home already, at the time. I was a teen mom, which I think I've, mentioned, and we're going to have episodes on that too. But so I had left my home very early on. I was about 16 years old when I moved out. So I wasn't there, but I did have 2 siblings. I had a sister who at the time she wasn't living home either. But she was 21. And then I had a younger sister who was only, I believe, 8 at the time. So for me, I was angry because I knew how much my mother loved her girls, especially my youngest sister. I mean, she was like her world, her life, she was her everything. So for her to then know that something so serious was going on and not take initiative to do something about it and save herself or help herself really, really upset me to my core. I dealt with that for quite some time also. It was a year, it was about 11 to 13 months of me just, practicing these feelings of anger and just being very reckless. I would go out any chance that I had and drink because I just wanted to numb the pain. And because I was trying so much to numb the pain and forget and not really just face my emotions head on, about 11 to 13 months after is when I finally sought help and looked for a therapist and a psychiatrist and really just finally got the help that I knew I needed at that point. It was, I just knew I was on a downward spiral and I needed help. I needed help to deal with this and face it head on and then also not be destructive. I had a child at the time who was 9 when my mother passed away. And yeah, it was very much a difficult journey, but thank goodness I did get the help that I needed because it changed my life in so many ways in such a positive direction. I grew in so many ways that I never knew I could. And I needed that. I really needed that even before my mother had passed. I think it was very much something that was needed in my life. When you're grieving in anger, I mentioned the emotions that come with that or the behaviors that come with that. But what it can look like is frustration, impatience, resentment, rage, and feeling out of control, which was something that I definitely felt. I felt, I think by the time I had gotten help, I had felt completely out of control. I had definitely felt that I needed to, I needed help and I needed to learn to deal with this, whatever, what I was going through. The third stage of grieving is bargaining. And bargaining can look like overthinking and worrying, comparing yourself to others, predicting the future, assuming the worst, perfectionism. And these are all emotions that I dealt with as well. I think one of the big ones for me was assuming the worst. I had such a pessimistic outlook on life and I was just very negative. And I think that was something that I really had to work through and realize that just because this happened in my life, it is a normal part of life. Let's say that too, is we're all here. We're not going to be here forever. Unfortunately, there's all going to be a day that we're born and there's all going to be a day that we die. And that's just something that we have to accept. It's life, and I think that's why it's so important, so very important to cherish each day, make the most of every moment with your loved ones. I don't want to get emotional because you never know. You never know when it will be your last day. And not knowing that someone's time has come and having to experience that it's truly difficult, and I dealt with a lot of regret and guilt. I felt like maybe I should have been more involved in her doctor's appointments, and I wasn't. I was working a lot at the time. I had a day job, a regular job, plus I worked at night, and when I worked at night, I worked at more than one place, so it was hard. And I really just had to find that optimistic outlook in life. I had to try to be positive again, or I had to try to find things that were worth looking forward to in life again. And things that brought me joy, things that just made me a better person. But where I was during that time of grieving, I just couldn't get there. And I think that even still, by the time I did go and get help, I think that I still was dealing with emotions after. I think just because you go through the 5 stages doesn't mean that that's it. It's over. You went through the 5 stages and now you're here at this acceptance stage. I think those other stages kind of show themselves here and there throughout the journey of grieving and missing your loved ones or, whoever it is that you lost. It's hard and it comes in waves. I remember reading something where it's like, grief comes in waves. Like you think you're okay one moment, you feel fine and, and then all of a sudden it smacks you down and hits you in the face and you're like, what is this? I know last Mother's Day, I think it was last Mother's Day, it might've been the one before. I felt great. I felt great about remembering my mother. I felt joy when thinking about one spent with her. I felt joy when thinking about memories. And then this Mother's Day came and it was a rough one, and it's strange because I remember when thinking back to the Mother's Day was where I felt good and I felt like I was in a good place. I thought that was it. I'm like, okay, I finally come to a place where I can enjoy these holidays again with my children and my family. And it's just not the case because there's going to be some holidays where it is going to hit you harder than others, out of nowhere. So that was tough. That was really tough for me to accept. And that's something that I've actually just learned recently within the last year or two, because I didn't realize I would kind of go back to that grieving stage. When you're going through bargaining, it can feel like guilt, shame, blame, fear, anxiety, and insecurity. And blame was definitely something that I did. I blamed myself. I blamed some people close to her at the time. I felt like it was their fault. I felt like anger towards them. And then I realized, it took me years to realize, but it's no one's fault. Destiny is no one's fault. It's how it happened. And the blaming myself, I felt like I should have been more involved. Maybe I should have gone to her doctor's appointments. And when she was rushed to the hospital a few times for her severe chest pain, I would go visit her in the hospital, but I never talked to the doctors. I never asked questions really, which there's other issues that were going on that is kind of a whole separate episode. So I will touch on that, where I really was more involved in. And I thought that particular situation when dealing with my mother was more crucial and more important. It had to do with like mental health. So I was very involved in that aspect when it came to my mother, with dealing with the doctors and being there and being very present for that. But when it came to her heart, I guess I just didn't realize how severe it was, because had I realized how severe it was, I definitely would have been more hands-on and making sure she had to got the care that she needed and had that surgery and been there to support her and be there for her and tell her it was going to be okay. And I didn't do that. I didn't do that when she was going through her heart issues. So I definitely blamed myself a lot, and I had this extreme feeling of guilt. And I'm sure anyone that has gone through this can definitely relate and attest to saying that feeling guilty when someone passes is horrible. It's a horrible, horrible feeling. So I'll leave that one there because I just don't want to get too emotional in this episode. And then the fourth stage of guilt is depression. Depression. Oh, depression. Boy, did that hit me. It was definitely something that was, I was going through. And, my one sibling at the time, I remember hearing and talking, actually, I think I learned this in like therapy. Some people, they go through the stages right away and it affects them immediately. And then some people, they're fine at the time, and that could be because it's a defense mechanism when dealing with shock, that they're fine at the time, and then as time goes on, all of a sudden they're faced with all these feelings and emotions and things that they're going through. Because my sister at the time, the one that was 21, she was handling it so well in the beginning, and I remember looking at her and saying, my goodness, why am I dealing with this in such a way? And she seems to be so strong and put together, and it hit her later, but it's grief looks different for everyone. There are those same 5 stages that everyone experiences, but as far as the process of grief and process of the feelings and emotions, it's different for everyone when they'll experience it or how they'll experience it. It's not one size fits all. But depression can look like lack of sleep, appetite changes, reduced energy, reduced social interest, reduced motivation, crying. And I experienced a lot of these. I think the one thing that I didn't experience was like the lack of social interest. I think because I was trying to numb the pain so much and I wanted to just forget about it. I didn't want to deal with it. I didn't want to face the emotions. I was definitely keeping my social life. I was going out as much as I could. I was drinking as much as I could, whenever I could, when I was out. The one good thing is I wasn't sitting home drinking, by myself. Not that that's any better, because obviously being out and drinking to where, you are not really coherent is not healthy. It's not healthy at all, period. But when you're grieving and trying to deal with something serious or major that happened in your life, it's only going to make the feelings worse, make your situation worse. It doesn't make anything better. You feel like crap. It depletes you of so many things, and it's just not worth it. It's really not worth it. But At that time, that was what I did. I wanted to feel numb. I did not want to feel this emotion and this pain. And yeah, but it was definitely lack of sleep. Sleep, what was that? I didn't need it. I would work at night. I'd get home, whatever time in the middle of the morning. I'd get up. I'd go work at my day job. I mean, I just really didn't sleep, I remember. And I couldn't sleep. I was obviously exhausted and dealing with a lot, but I couldn't sleep. My appetite just wasn't there. But depression can feel like sadness, despair, helplessness, hopelessness, disappointment, and completely overwhelmed. And I honestly think I felt every single one of those. I felt sadness. I felt despair. I felt homelessness. I did not feel homelessness. Hopelessness. I'm sorry. And overwhelmed. I definitely felt every single one of those emotions at that time. And I think once that depression finally kicked in and, some major things happened in my life, I just knew I needed to get help. Not only for myself, but for my son who was there and watching. And I remember saying to myself, I need to be able to show him grieving healthy is normal. Obviously these feelings are normal, but I never wanted him to have this experience and then grow up one day and go through follow those same things that I dealt with. This is a difficult episode, as you can see, but kind of sidetracking a little bit. My mother's birthday was on September 17th, which was this past Saturday. By the time you guys see this, it'll be a little bit ahead of time because this is pre-recorded, but her birthday was on Saturday, and I just felt like, once I knew I had to do an episode alone, I thought that this was a good episode for me to do. So, and it's, it was just good timing. It's around her birthday. And yeah, I just felt like it couldn't be a more appropriate time, I guess you could say. And then on Sunday, which was the day after my mother's birthday, I had gotten a dog in 2004. So my mother had spent a good 3 years with my dog. She was the caretaker for my dog when I was on vacation or away or anything like that. She would babysit my dog for me, dog sit, babysit, whatever. And she knew him. She was attached to him. Anyway, long story short, I had that dog for 17 and a half years, and he passed away on September 18th, 2021, which was a year ago this past Sunday. So it was a rough weekend for me between my mother's birthday and then the next day, my dog's 1 year. Emotions were all over the place. It was really hard. I didn't expect it to be that difficult this past weekend, but it truly was. So those anniversary dates really hit hard now, and birthdays are, I think, the biggest trigger for me. It could be, especially my own birthday, which is crazy. I guess, someone had pointed out, one of my friends, she lost her mother also, and she pointed out, that's the day that our mothers gave birth to us, so who wants to celebrate your birth more than your parents? And I think that's truly where that pain sets in. But birthdays in general, my kids' birthdays, my birthday, my mother's birthday, those I think for some reason are the hardest for me. And I think it's just the yearning of her being here, wanting her here and being with us. And obviously the holidays, all the other holidays are hard too, Mother's Day. But birthdays hit the hardest for me, personally speaking. I wonder if anyone else experiences that. I know my one friend who lost her mom as well, she said the same thing. And I have a couple other friends, but I just wonder, is there anyone, out there that you've gone through this, and was it hard? are birthdays harder for you than other holidays, or is it just the same? I didn't start going through my final stage of grief until, I think I want to say once I started therapy. I started therapy, and I did at the time, I had to go on antidepressants and anxiety medication. We found something that just worked for me, and I stayed on that. I stayed on the antidepressant for 2 years, I want to say, on definitely a much better path, and being able to see and talk to someone just helped me so much. And then when I got pregnant with my daughter, when I was 29, that's when we finally, when my doctor at the time, she told me, she's like, you can stay on the medication if you think that's what's best for you. We don't want you to get off and feel depressed or any of those like symptoms of anxiety or hopelessness. And I didn't. I said that I felt good. I thought that I was at a really good place. I was really happy. I was excited about bringing a new baby into this world. It was a girl. I was over the moon, elated. I was just so excited. And we weaned off. We weaned off my medications, and we got off of everything. And it was the best thing I could have done, because I was really in a good place. So I'm all for therapy or medication as needed, like when needed. I personally don't like anything long term, unless obviously you have a medical, a mental condition, or a medical condition where you need medication, to be able to function normally. Then that's completely different. But this was just, I was really just going through a really depressive state from losing my mother, and it was just what I needed at the time to get to a healthy place, or a good space, and then I was able to move on and move forward. But the last stage of grief is acceptance. And that was the hardest for me. And like I said, I didn't experience that until I got into therapy. And acceptance can look like mindful behaviors, engaging with reality as it is. And this is how things are right now. Just obviously accepting that this is what happened. This is how things are right now. And this is what I have to accept moving forward. And being present in the moment and able to be vulnerable and tolerate emotions. You're being assertive and you're being non-defensive, which that was another thing. Emotions for me before I got therapy were very overwhelming, overwhelming to the point where it was difficult. It was difficult for me to deal with emotions, no matter what they were. It was just, the different emotions was just so overwhelming for me. And until I got therapy and got some help is when I finally were able to be more mindful about my behaviors and accepting and being able to think about the good times and cherish the memories that I did have with my mother and my siblings, in order to share those with my soon-to-be daughter. Now, my son, obviously, he had a relationship with my mother until he was 9. They were very close, but he was still young, but at least he still had that memory. We had photos, we had videos. But when it would come to my daughter, she would have no recollection of my mother whatsoever. So I felt like it was up to me to feel good enough to be able to share these memories with her. And, it was just adapting and coping, responding skillfully. And definitely within that time frame of therapy, which, lasted for me for almost 2 years. So quite some time, I think. I don't know how long people do therapy and such, but for me, it was a good 2 years of doing so, and almost 2 years, and feeling like I was really at a good place. But acceptance can also feel like you're good enough, you're courageous, you have your courage is back, you have validation and self-compassion and pride and wisdom, because going through something so tragic as losing someone, you really kind of lose yourself throughout that process. You lose pieces of yourself. You lose just things that you didn't know could happens. And once you come out of the situation and once like you've gotten to that stage of acceptance, you've gained so much wisdom and knowledge. I mean, you really did. You really gained so much from the experience, and it stinks that we have to go through something so tragic or so hurtful in order to feel this newfound wisdom and knowledge. But it does. It benefits us in life in ways that you wouldn't think possible. So yeah, those are the 5 stages of grief. Definitely been through every single one. And like I said, in each stage, there's different emotions attached to each stage. So there's so many emotions that we go through when we're going through death, but the feelings with each stage are different. You know, the feelings obviously in each stage are similar, but from stage to stage, they vary. And yeah, you know, if you're ever feeling like you just can't deal with it or can't handle it or can't cope, don't ever be afraid to seek out help. That's what they're there for. You know, unless you feel like you can just talk to someone about it. But sometimes talking to someone, an outside party that really doesn't have any bias, sometimes it's easier to talk to someone like that. You know, my mother was a beautiful soul. May she rest in peace. My mom was awesome. And I remember, you know, being a little girl, and my mom lived for us. My mom's main priority was doing things that were fun for us. That was all she cared about. She would take us everywhere. She always found things to do. My mom was the one with like the little, what were those cars? It was like a station wagon type of thing. And she would take all of my friends. She would take my friends and their siblings or my sister's friends. And she would always take all of us. She always had a car full of kids. And, you know, and that was one thing that I definitely think I've pulled from our relationship and tried to tie into my family with my children, is just doing things with them and being so involved and just creating memories and being really present. That I can say my mother most certainly was, hands down. Is anyone perfect? No. And, you know, she wasn't perfect. And like I said, we'll go into some other episodes and cover some other topics such as like mental health or addictions and substance abuse and all those things we're going to cover too. But she was pretty awesome, and I'm really glad that she was so involved in my life because, you know, I had friends, their parents were never around. Their parents were always working or just not there, and I couldn't imagine growing up that way, you know. Yeah, that's not something I would want. Both my parents worked. My mother was a stay-at-home mom for a little bit, but then she went back into the work, you know, so they both worked, but didn't stop her from making her weekends or her evenings all about her girls. And that no one can take because that was something that was definitely done by her, and forever grateful for that. But I'm going to wrap up this episode. I don't want to make it too long. Not only that, I do have to get to class. I'm back in my classes right now, so I have to leave to class in less than 10 minutes. But I hope you enjoyed today's tea. I look forward to our next episode. Hopefully my co-host will be able to schedule our recording together so that we can bring some good tea for you in 2 weeks. And please, I beg you to please subscribe if you can, if you can't, leave a comment, then please just hit the like button at least. And don't forget to go on all our podcast platforms and leave some reviews or comments there. I'm thinking about doing like maybe a giveaway for comments. I don't know if I'm going to do it on the channel or on the podcast platform, but I plan on giving away something really, really good. So if you have any ideas of what I should give away or what you would like to see me give away, please definitely either email me at vanessa@tuesdayteawithv.com, or you can like always, you know, send me a direct message on any of the social media platforms, and I will definitely get back to you on there. Until next time, take care.
Love, light, peace,
Bye, dolls.
V, and C.